Bruce McConnell of Locomotive Systems Trading. Welcome back. We're still talking about the Federal Railroad Administration, and we've gone through about 3 rules, I think, from the last video, but now we're going to talk about what the FRA guidance is regarding each of those rules. So bear with me a moment while we spool this thing up to get to the guidance of that section, Rule 229 dot. Help me out, folks. 2.1. Oh, there it is right there. So we're going to spool it up, and there it is. Okay, here we go. Let's take a look at it. Guidance. The purpose of the calendar day inspection is to ascertain that the locomotive is safe to operate in the service for which it is used, and it is in total compliance. Total compliance with Part 229 prior to being placed in service. It is a visual walk-around inspection of the locomotive that provides an opportunity every day the locomotive is used to find and correct incipient problems before they lead to an accident or safety incident. An effective locomotive calendar day inspection requires that the individual performing the inspection be alert for any telltale signs of any condition or defects that is a potential hazard. Now remember, from the last video we talked about the guidance portion that the FRA is looking for anything that's a potential hazard that can hurt the crew or cause damage to the locomotive. Okay? After a daily inspection is performed, the locomotive shall be free of any non-compliant conditions before it is offered for service. The locomotive cannot legally be used until all federal defects are corrected. If the inspector continues to find recurrent defects or a pattern of non-compliant conditions at a particular location, he or she, and they're referring to the FRA inspector here, make sure you're aware of that, should monitor the performance and the results of the daily inspections, as well as question the individual or individuals, different people inspecting that same locomotive, perform the inspection to ascertain if the individual or individuals, plural, has the knowledge and ability to perform such inspections. Maybe those inspectors are missing something very important that the FRA inspector is catching. If daily inspection reports reflect non-compliant conditions of a locomotive and the inspector finds the conditions were not corrected by the railroad and the locomotive continues to be used, violations should be submitted. Such violations should be accompanied by all of the documentation available with a complete explanation regarding the railroad operation at that location. So, the takeaway so far in this guidance is it's a visual walk around. The locomotive has to be inspected. Any non-compliant defects must be repaired before the locomotive is allowed for service. The inspector will also monitor and check for recurrent conditions of non-compliant at that particular location, and they're also monitoring people that are actually doing the inspection to make sure they have the knowledge and ability to perform such inspections. And also they're looking here to make sure that any report that reflects non-compliant conditions and the inspection were not corrected by the railroad and the railroad continues to be using it, then the FRA inspector will issue a report based on available documentation with a complete explanation regarding the railroad operation at the time. So they're making sure that the locomotive, FRA making sure the locomotive is inspected properly. That's what they're saying on all this information. Let's go to the next page. And a little bit more, and again, this is such a huge section. We're just going to take it just for a little bit. Okay, right here we're going to start. Same rule still, rule FRA 229.21. All right, it says your failure to complete or produce a record report in and of itself is not sufficient evidence to establish that a railroad failed to perform an inspection. It is a records violation. There's a difference between being able to complete or produce a record as opposed to having the railroad that failed to perform the inspection at all. So the railroad might have it, but that for whatever reason they can't locate it, as opposed to not doing an inspection at all. Excuse me. It is a records violation unless other evidence, that is witness statements, interviews, event recorder downloads. That's right, event recorder downloads. Whatever happened to that locomotive, that event recorder is recording that. So the FRA will go to that and use that. Visual observations, etc. It's obtained to establish the failure to conduct the inspection. If the only evidence available merely establishes the failure to complete the cab card or a failure of a railroad to produce a required inspection report, then the appropriate section to cite for civil penalties, 229.21A2, period, or excuse me, comma. Report not properly executed or retained. Use the lack of a record and or report to support the other evidence obtained to establish a failure to perform an inspection violation. Whew! There's a lot right there. So what this whole paragraph is about is the FRA is asking for an inspection report and the railroad can't produce it. then they're going to cite them with specific violations. Like up here, it says it's a records violation. Okay, use the lack of a record or report to support other evidence. A failure to perform an inspection. So all these things combined puts a burden on the railroad. Say you got to produce a record that locomotive was inspected properly, and the railroad has to produce that. I'm going to be brave and try one more paragraph. I think time-wise we're okay. So let's do one more. Section A. A daily inspection is required by this section for each day a locomotive is in use. A written report and record are required when the inspection is performed. The inspection can be conducted at any time during the calendar day. It can be done just before midnight or just after midnight. If an inspection were performed just after midnight, the locomotive can be legally used for almost 48 hours before the next inspection is required. An inspection is not needed unless the locomotive is used during the calendar day. Got that? I'll say it again. An inspection is not needed unless the locomotive is used during the calendar day. If a locomotive completes an assignment prior to the expiration date of the calendar day and is not returned to service for several days, it would need a daily inspection before midnight of the day it was put back in service. So the key there is that locomotive in service or is it not in service? Okay? This regulation has a number of ambiguities that each inspector must be aware of when judging the inspection status of any given locomotive. So what this section's about, it'll tell you what a calendar day is and how you can apply that inspection to that calendar day, where you can overlap, like I said, just before midnight and then one just after midnight or wherever it's at. But the key to this whole section right here is that locomotive in service or is it not in service? If it's in service, then it requires the daily inspection. If it's not in service, it does not. All right, so we learned a couple of cool things there today. And like I said, this rule is rather long, and this is what we cover in that basic FRA class, the 2-day class. Again, go online at www.lst-ca.com. Check it out. Once again, www.lst-ca.com. Again, Bruce McConnell from Locomotive Systems Training. Thanks for watching the video. Be safe out there and have a good day.